The wind came first, as it always did in the valley. A whisper that turned to a moan, carrying red dust across land so broken even God seemed to have abandoned it. Ezra Callahan stood at his window, watching the desert paint itself in shades of dying light. 43 years old, though the mirror suggested 60. 7 years of silence had carved deep lines into his face, lines that had nothing to do with sun or age. He'd stopped counting days sometime in the 3rd year. What was the point? One sunrise looked like the last, each sunset a repeat of forgiveness never coming. The ranch, if you could call it that, sat in a forgotten pocket of Arizona territory, 3 days' hard ride from anything resembling civilization. The corrals stood empty, had been empty since he'd arrived. He kept no cattle, grew no crops. The well still gave water, sparse and grudging. That was enough. The house was adobe and weathered wood, 2 rooms that echoed with absence. In the larger room, a table, 1 chair, a stove that heated beans and coffee. In the smaller, a bedroll, a trunk containing clothes he rarely changed. And the rifle. Always the rifle. He cleaned it every morning with the devotion other men gave to prayer, though he'd fired it exactly twice in 7 years, both times at rattlesnakes that had wandered too close to the well. His only companion was the gelding in the lean-to, a gray creature as old and broken as Ezra himself. Sometimes he spoke to the horse, brief fragments that barely qualified as words. Easy now. Hold steady. Even those felt like violations of the silence he'd imposed on himself, the only punishment that seemed adequate for what he'd done, what he'd allowed to be done. The distinction had stopped mattering somewhere around year 4. He'd been Captain Ezra Callahan once, 3rd Cavalry, tasked with pacification of the Apache. That was the word they used, pacification. As if you could bring peace through the barrel of a gun, through the systematic destruction of everything that made a people who they were. He'd been good at his job, too good. His superiors praised his efficiency, his discipline, his ability to get results. March 17th, 1879. The date was branded into his brain with iron clarity, though he'd forgotten nearly everything else from that year. A canyon 30 miles south of here, an Apache village that intelligence said harbored warriors who'd raided supply lines. They rode in at dawn. The warriors fought, died quickly. Standard engagement. Then it wasn't standard anymore. His men, good soldiers, family men with photographs of children back east, had kept shooting. Women running with infants. Elders too slow to flee. He could still see Private Henderson's face, twisted with something beyond rage, something that looked almost like joy as he reloaded and fired again. Could still hear Sergeant Markham's laughter. Ezra had stood there, said nothing, did nothing. 23 women dead, 14 children. The warriors numbered 8. The official report called it a successful engagement with minimal casualties. His commander shook his hand, mentioned a promotion.
That night, Ezra vomited until he tasted blood. He resigned his commission 4 months later. The army accepted with reluctance. War heroes were valuable propaganda. They tried to change his mind, offered him a desk position in Washington. He took his pension, bought this failing ranch from a widow who was desperate to leave Arizona, and rode into the valley alone. 7 years of silence. 7 years of beans and coffee and nightmares.
7 years of that rifle, cleaned, but never fired at anything human, because he'd forfeited the right to take life or preserve it. The wind picked up, rattling the loose board on the northern wall that he never bothered to fix. Winter was coming, though winter in Arizona meant merely that the days became bearable and the nights turned vicious. He'd need to bring in more wood soon. The thought felt heavy, exhausting. Everything felt exhausting. He poured himself whiskey, the cheap stuff from Tucson, when he made his quarterly supply runs, and sat at his single chair, watching the light die. The whiskey helped him sleep sometimes. Sometimes it just made the nightmares more vivid. The knock came around midnight. Ezra froze with the glass halfway to his lips. In 7 years, no one had knocked on that door. No one knew he was here, and that's how he wanted it. He set the glass down slowly, moved to the rifle propped beside the stove. His hands remembered the motions, checked the chamber, thumbed the hammer back. Another knock, softer this time. Not insistent, almost apologetic. He moved to the door, rifle ready, though some distant part of him wondered what he'd actually do if threatened. Fire? After 7 years of self-imposed pacifism? Or simply accept whatever violence came as the justice he'd evaded? Please. The voice was female, accented, barely audible through the wood. Please, we need help. English, but shaped by another tongue. Apache, he knew immediately. He'd heard enough of it during the war, enough screamed curses and final prayers. His hand hesitated on the door latch. Every instinct said to stay silent, wait them out. They'd leave eventually. He could maintain his isolation, his carefully constructed punishment. Please, we are dying. He opened the door. 12 women stood in his yard, illuminated by moonlight that seemed too bright, too revealing. Their ages ranged from maybe 15 to past 50. They wore a mixture of traditional dress and scavenged army blankets, all of it filthy, torn, stained with what looked like blood in the silver light. 3 were visibly wounded, held upright by the others. They all stared at him with eyes that held no hope, just the desperate calculation of creatures with no options left. The woman who'd spoken stepped forward, tall, perhaps 30, with a face that would have been beautiful if not carved hollow by exhaustion and fear. We ask for shelter, for 1 night. Then we go. Ezra's throat had forgotten how to form words. 7 years of silence had calcified something essential. He tried anyway, the sound coming out like rust scraping rust. Who's hunting you? Soldiers. She said it simply, as if it explained everything. Perhaps it did. How many? Maybe 20, maybe more. A day behind us, maybe less. She looked at him directly, reading something in his face. You were soldier too, I see it. His scar. The one that ran from his left temple to his jaw, courtesy of a Comanche lance in 76. It marked him as clearly as a brand. Not anymore, he managed. Neither are we anything anymore. She gestured to the others. We were being relocated to reservation. But before we leave, the lieutenant, he tells his men about sport they will have. We understand enough English, so we run. Ezra felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew what sport meant. He'd heard the stories, turned blind eyes to evidence. Which lieutenant? Marcus Fry. The name hit him like a bullet. Frey. He'd served under Ezra briefly in 78 before being transferred. Even then, the man had shown signs of the sadism that apparently had since flourished. There'd been an incident with prisoners, one that Ezra had reported up the chain of command. Nothing happened. Frey got transferred, probably promoted. He will kill us, the woman continued, her voice perfectly level. But first, worse things. We prefer to die here, in open, than give him that. Behind her, one of the younger girls, couldn't have been more than 16, swayed and collapsed. 2 others caught her before she hit the ground. In the moonlight, Ezra could see the wound in her side, the blood that had soaked through her dress. He should send them away. Had to send them away. Helping fugitives from the army would make him a criminal, a traitor. They'd hang him probably, after a court-martial that would last all of an afternoon. More than that, he'd forfeited the right to be anyone's savior. The blood on his hands disqualified him from mercy, from grace, from the luxury of redemption, through good deeds. The silence stretched. The women waited, past the point of begging. They'd asked once. They wouldn't ask again. Ezra saw himself standing in that canyon, 7 years ago, watching, doing nothing. Inside, he heard himself say. Quickly. They moved like ghosts, silent despite their injuries, practiced in the art of leaving no trace. The older woman, the one who'd spoken, paused as she passed him. Up close, he could see the gray threading her black hair, the network of old scars on her hands. "Thank you," she said softly. Then, in Apache, something else. He didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. It wasn't gratitude. It was something darker, more complex. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Of what, he couldn't say. When the last of them had entered, he closed the door and set the rifle back against the wall. His hands were shaking. The small room that had held one man in solitude now held 13 souls, and the air itself seemed to compress with the weight of everything unspoken. One of the wounded women lay on his bedroll now, her breath coming in short gasps. The girl who'd collapsed was on the floor nearby, already unconscious or close to it. The others arranged themselves along the walls, making themselves as small as possible, trying not to impose any more than necessary. The tall woman stood near the stove. "I am Dahana," she said. "This," she gestured to an older woman who'd helped with the wounded, "is my grandmother, Naicha." Naicha looked at him with eyes that were too calm, too knowing. She said something in Apache, her voice carrying a strange mix of contempt and curiosity. "She recognizes you," Dahana translated quietly. Ezra felt his spine turn to ice. "From where?" Naiche spoke again, longer this time, never taking her eyes from his face. Her words had the rhythm of accusation. "From Spring Canyon, March of 1879. You commanded the soldiers that day." Dahana's voice remained neutral, but her jaw had tightened. "She lost 2 sons. She remembers your face, the scar. You stood on the ridge watching." The room became airless. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All he could see was that canyon again, the bodies, the smoke, Henderson's twisted grin. He stopped. What was there to say? "I'm sorry." Sorry meant nothing. Sorry was an insult. "Yes, I was there." Naicha said something else, shorter, sharper. "She says you did not pull trigger," Dahana translated. "But you also did not stop them." She asks, which is worse. Ezra had asked himself that question every day for 7 years. He'd never found an answer. "I don't know," he said. The first honest words he'd spoken to another human being since he'd resigned his commission. Naiche held his gaze for a long moment, then turned away, moving to help with the wounded, dismissed, judged and found wanting, but currently necessary. "Why do you help us?" Dahana asked. "If you are what she says you are." Another question without a good answer. "Because I didn't help last time? Because I'm trying to buy my way out of hell with a single good deed? Because 7 years of silence haven't been enough punishment and maybe dying defending you from Frey will be?" "Because you asked," he said finally. It wasn't enough, but it was all he had. Dawn came reluctantly, as if the sun itself hesitated to witness what would follow. Ezra hadn't slept. He'd spent the night on the floor near the door, rifle across his lap, listening to the shallow breathing of the wounded and the whispered prayers in Apache. Prayers to gods he didn't know, in a language systematically beaten out of children in mission schools, spoken now with the defiance of the soon-to-be dead. The girl with the side wound, her name was Itza, Dahana had told him, made it through the night. But her fever was rising. The woman on his bedroll, an elder named Cocheta, needed more than water and bandages, needed a doctor, medicine, things this forgotten ranch didn't have. As light filtered through the gaps in the walls, Ezra could see them better. Most bore the marks of hard travel, blistered feet, clothes torn by mesquite and rock. But underneath that were older scars, older wounds. Naiche's left hand was missing 2 fingers, cut off, not lost in accident. Another woman, barely 20, had a brand on her forearm, the letters U.S. seared into flesh. Government property, the Army's way of tracking assets. Dahana appeared beside him, moving with a silence that suggested a lifetime of practice. "They will come today," she said. Maybe by afternoon. He nodded. Probably. Frey's not the type to give up easy. You know him? Served with him briefly. He's... Ezra paused, searching for words. He's what the war made. Or maybe he was always that way and the war just gave him permission. Are you what the war made? The question was gentle, but it cut nonetheless. I don't know what I am. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of copper and blood. My grandmother, she is not wrong about you, about what you did or what you did not do. I know, but she is also alive because you opened the door last night. That is also true. One choice doesn't erase the other. No, Dahana agreed, it does not. But perhaps it matters anyway. Outside, his gelding nickered nervously. Ezra stood, moved to the window. Nothing visible yet, but the horse knew. Animals always knew. I need to check the perimeter, he said. Stay inside. Don't light the stove. Smoke will give away your position. You think walls will stop them? No. But maybe I can. She looked at him with something that wasn't quite trust, wasn't quite contempt. You are one man with one rifle. They are 20 soldiers with orders. Then I'll slow them down. Give you time to run. Where? We have been running. There is nowhere left. The truth of it sat heavy between them. The Apache wars were ending, had effectively ended already. Geronimo would surrender within months. Everyone knew it, even if they didn't want to admit it. The last free bands were being hunted down, exterminated or imprisoned. There was no sanctuary, no safe territory left. Just different flavors of death. I'll think of something, he said, knowing it was a lie. You have been silent for 7 years, she said quietly. My grandmother told me. She asked in the night about you, about the man with the scar. Others remember stories. The captain who left, who refused to fight anymore. They say you hide here, punishing yourself. They say right. And now you will die for us, for your punishment? I'll die because it's the only thing left I can do that matters. She studied him with eyes that seemed older than her years. My grandmother says dying is easy. Living with what you have done is hard. Perhaps your punishment should be to live. Before he could respond, Nietzsche called out something urgent. Dahana moved quickly to the bedroll where Cochetta lay. The older woman's breathing had changed, become labored and wet. Blood flecked her lips. Internal bleeding, Ezra said, recognizing the signs. Lung, maybe. Or liver. Can you help her? No, not without a surgeon. He hesitated. I can make her comfortable. I have laudanum. For the pain. Nietzsche and Dahana exchanged words in Apache, rapid and complex. Finally, Nietzsche nodded. Ezra retrieved the small bottle from his trunk. He'd kept it for himself, for the day when silence wasn't enough punishment anymore, and carefully administered a few drops. Cochetta's breathing eased, her face relaxing from its rictus of pain. She spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Nietzsche leaned close, listening, then replied softly. A conversation in a dying language between women who knew they were already ghosts. When it was done, Nietzsche looked at Ezra and said something in careful English. She says, not your fault. This wound, the soldiers, 3 days ago. She says, to tell you. I know it's not, he began. No. Nietzsche shook her head, frustrated with the language, with the limitations of translation. She tried again. She says you carry too much. She sees it. Your burden. She says, not yours alone. Whole world did this. You just, one man. Ezra felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 7 years. Tell her. Thank you. But Nietzsche was already turning away, and Ezra realized with a jolt that Cochetta had stopped breathing. Just like that, between one moment and the next. No drama, no final words. Just a cessation, as natural as sunset. The women gathered around the body, and a low keening began, ancient and wordless. It raised the hairs on Ezra's neck, that sound, part grief, part rage, part prayer to gods that white men had declared dead. He stepped back, giving them space, giving them privacy for their grief. Dahana found him by the window 20 minutes later. "We must bury her. There's a rise about 100 yards north. Rocky, but we can manage it. They will see fresh earth, know we are here." "They already know," Ezra said. "Frey's probably tracking you by scent at this point." "He's like that." They buried Cocheta as the sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. The women worked in silence, piling rocks over the shallow grave, since the earth was too hard for proper digging. Ezra kept watch, rifle ready, but saw nothing except the shimmer of heat and the endless sky. When it was done, Nietzsche spoke words over the grave, not in English, not for Ezra's understanding. This was for the dead woman, for the gods of mountains and sky that the priests said didn't exist, but somehow felt more present in this wasteland than anything Ezra had encountered in churches. Back in the house, the mood had shifted. The women were no longer waiting passively. They were preparing. Several had found rocks from the burial, sized for throwing. 2 had knives, small things, barely more than sharpened scraps, but deadly enough at close range. They were arranging themselves strategically, near windows, beside the door, in corners that would provide cover. They knew how to fight. Of course they did. They'd been fighting their whole lives. "When they come," Dahana said, "we do not surrender. You understand? We prefer death." "I understand." "You could still give us to them. Tell them you found us, held us. They would believe you. You would be safe." He almost laughed. "I haven't been safe since 1879. Then we die together. Maybe. Or maybe I buy you time to run east toward Mexico. The border's a week on foot, but if you move fast, and I'll hold them here, long as I can." She shook her head. "You cannot stop 20 men. Don't need to stop them. Just need to delay them. Frey's proud. He won't leave without resolving the situation. If I engage him, make it personal, he'll focus on me. Give you hours. Maybe a day. You would do this?" Ezra looked at the women arranged around the room, these survivors of a genocide still in progress, still fighting despite knowing how the story ended. Looked at Nietzsche, who'd lost her sons to his silence, and still spoke words of release over his guilt. Looked at young Itza, fevered and wounded, but gripping her rock with determination. "Yes," he said. "I would." Dahana was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My grandmother wishes to speak with you." Nietzsche sat in the corner, her back against the adobe wall. Up close, Ezra could see she was probably not much older than him. Late 40s, maybe 50. But life had worn her like wind wears stone. She gestured for him to sit across from her. She spoke in Apache first, long and flowing, her hands moving to punctuate certain words. Then, switching to halting English. "I see. In canyon. See you on ridge. You watch. Not shoot. Not stop. But also, not smile. Not enjoy." "No," Ezra said quietly. "I didn't enjoy it. Your men, they laugh. They make sport." She spat the word. "You do not. You stand. You watch. You do nothing. But your face." She touched her own face. "Your face tells me you die that day too. Part of you. Part of me did. Good. Is good you carry that. Is weight you should carry." She paused, searching for words. "But now you choose different." "Why?" "Because I can't choose different for that day. But I can choose different for this one." She considered this, then nodded slowly. "My granddaughter, Dahana. She is last of my blood. Her mother, killed. Her father, killed. If you save her, If you make her live, then maybe you are balanced. No, not balanced, but maybe less heavy. I don't deserve. Not about deserve. She cut him off sharply. About what is. You carry weight. I carry weight. We all carry. But still we choose what we do next. That is all we have. Choice of next thing. From outside came the distant sound of hoofbeats. Not close yet, but approaching. 20 horses, maybe more, moving at a walk, not rushing. Why rush when your prey has nowhere to run? Ezra stood, moved to the window. In the distance, a dust plume rose against the pale sky. They're here! The women moved to their positions without panic, with the practiced calm of those who'd faced death before. Dahana checked on Itza, spoke soft words that made the girl nod despite her fever. Naicha remained in her corner, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. One more thing, Naicha said in English, her eyes opening to meet Ezra's. That day, in Canyon, my sons, they died fighting, as warriors. You see this? Yes. They fought well. And the women? The children? Ezra felt his throat close. They weren't given the chance to fight. Who killed them? Not you. But who? Private Henderson, Sergeant Markham, others. I stopped learning their names. You remember their names, she said with certainty. You remember all of it. He did. Every face, every shot, every scream. Yes. Good. Remember. But also remember this day. Remember you chose different. Both true. Both real. Both part of who you are. The hoofbeats were louder now, close enough to count. Ezra checked his rifle, made sure the chamber was full. 6 shots. Against 20 men, the mathematics were clear. Dahana, he said, when it starts, you take the others and go out the back. East, like I said. Don't stop, don't look back. Mexico's your only chance. And Itza, she cannot walk. I'll carry her as far as the rocks. After that, he didn't finish. After that, hard choices. The kind where you left the weak to save the strong. The kind that haunted you forever. The kind he'd been avoiding for 7 years. The hoofbeats stopped. In the sudden silence, Ezra could hear his own heartbeat, too loud, too fast. Then a voice, amplified by the desert's emptiness. Captain Callahan, I know you're in there. Frey. Of course Frey knew his name, knew he was here. The bastard had probably known all along. Kept it in reserve for a moment like this. The Apache women you're harboring are fugitives from lawful military custody. Send them out and we'll consider your cooperation. Ezra moved to the door, cracked it open. 20 soldiers arranged in a semicircle, rifles ready. Frey sat his horse in the center, older than Ezra remembered, harder, with eyes that had seen too much and enjoyed all of it. Lieutenant Frey, Ezra called out. Still spreading joy and democracy, I see. Frey smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Captain, or is it just Ezra now? Heard you retired. Didn't hear you took up harboring savages. They asked for help. I gave it. That's unfortunate. For you, I mean. We've been tracking these particular prisoners for 3 days. Can't have them escaping. Sets a bad precedent. He shifted in his saddle. Send them out, and we'll forget this happened. You can go back to whatever it is you do out here in the middle of nowhere. And if I don't? Then you're in violation of about 6 different regulations, and I'm authorized to use whatever force necessary to complete my mission. The smile widened. I'd prefer not to kill a decorated officer, but orders are orders. Ezra glanced back at the women behind him, at Dahana holding Itza, at Naiche with her missing fingers and her terrible calm, at 11 lives that the world had decided were disposable. Here's my counteroffer, he said. You leave now. File a report saying they died in the desert. I'll swear to it if asked. Everyone goes home. Frey actually laughed. That's not how this works, Captain. You know that. These aren't people. They're problems to be solved. And I solve problems. By raping women? By murdering children? That's your solution? The smile vanished. Careful, Captain. That sounds like an accusation. It's an observation, based on reputation. My reputation, Frey said slowly, is that I get results. That I do what needs to be done while men like you run away to the desert to feel sorry for themselves. He raised his voice. You have 1 minute to send them out. After that, we're coming in. Ezra closed the door, turned to face the women. Dahana, back way, now. You cannot... I can hold them for a while. Long enough. Go. But Nietzsche said something sharp in Apache, and suddenly none of the women were moving. They stood their ground, rocks and knives ready, facing the door with the resignation of those who'd chosen their death. No, Dahana said quietly. We stay. We fight together, or we die together. That's not... You have a chance if you run. There is no chance, she said simply. There has been no chance for a long time, but we can choose how we end. We choose this. With you. Together. Outside, Frey was counting down. 30 seconds, Captain. Ezra looked at these women, strangers hours ago, now somehow his responsibility, his chance, his only shot at something resembling redemption, and understood that arguing was pointless. They'd made their choice, just as he'd made his. 15 seconds! He moved to the window, rifle ready. Behind him, the women spread out, maximizing coverage. Nietzsche was singing now, low and rhythmic. A death song, maybe, or a prayer. The others joined in, their voices blending into something that raised every hair on Ezra's body. Time's up! The door exploded inward under a battering ram. 3 soldiers rushed through, and Ezra fired. 1 shot, center mass, the man dropped. 2nd shot hit the 2nd man in the shoulder. 3rd shot missed as he adjusted for the 3rd soldier. Then chaos. The women swarmed the wounded soldier, rocks rising and falling. His screams were brief. The 3rd soldier made it 2 steps before Dahana's knife found his throat. Blood sprayed across the adobe wall, impossibly red in the dim light. More soldiers at the door. Ezra fired again, dropped one, but then his rifle clicked empty. No time to reload. He grabbed the barrel, swung it like a club, connected with someone's jaw. Bone crunched. A soldier grabbed one of the younger women, threw her against the wall. Before he could turn, Nietzsche was on him, driving her small knife up under his ribs with the precision of long practice. He folded, disbelief in his eyes. Gunfire from outside. Bullets punched through the adobe, sending dust and fragments spraying. One of the women, he didn't see who, cried out and fell. Then another. Ezra reloaded frantically, got 3 rounds in before a soldier tackled him from the side. They went down hard, wrestling for the rifle. The soldier was younger, stronger, but Ezra fought with the desperate strength of a man who'd been waiting 7 years to make this choice count. He got his thumb in the soldier's eye. The man screamed, rolled away. Ezra came up with the rifle, fired point blank into the man's chest. Then something hit him from behind, a rifle butt to the base of the skull. The world tilted, went dark at the edges. He stumbled, tried to raise his weapon, but his hands wouldn't obey. Through the haze, he saw Frey step through the door, pristine and smiling, surveying the carnage with the satisfaction of a job well done. 4 women were down now, maybe dead, maybe dying. The others fought on, but it was hopeless. More soldiers poured in, overwhelming through sheer numbers. Dahana still stood, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead, knife in hand. She lunged at Frey, but he sidestepped easily, brought his pistol around, shot her in the stomach. She went down hard. Enough! Frey's voice cut through the chaos. Stand down, all of you! The soldiers stopped, breathing hard, blood splattered. 6 of them lay dead or dying, more than Ezra would have thought possible. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Nietzsche knelt beside Dahana, pressing her hands to the wound. She looked at Ezra with eyes that held no accusation, no anger, just a quiet acknowledgement. We tried. Frey walked over to Ezra, grabbed him by the hair, yanked his head back. Look at what you did, Captain. 6 good men dead because you wanted to play hero. Was it worth it? Ezra's vision was clearing, though his head throbbed where he'd been hit. He looked at the women still alive. 5, maybe 6. It was hard to tell through the blood and smoke. Looked at Dahana bleeding out on his floor. Looked at Naiche still trying, still fighting. "Yes," he said. Frey hit him hard across the face. Blood filled Ezra's mouth. "You're going to hang for this. Treason, murder, aiding the enemy. They'll make an example of you." "Good." Another hit. "What?" "I said good." Ezra spat blood. "Let them. Let everyone know what you did. What I tried to stop. Let them hear it all." Understanding dawned in Frey's eyes, then rage. "You think anyone will care? You think your testimony means anything? You're a coward who ran away from the war. No one will listen." "Maybe, but I'll say it anyway." Frey raised his pistol, pressed it against Ezra's forehead. "I should just kill you now." "You should," Ezra agreed. "But you won't. Because you need me alive for the court-martial. Need to make it official. Need it to look legitimate." The pistol trembled slightly. Frey wanted to pull the trigger. Ezra could see it in his eyes. But he was right. A dead Callahan would raise questions. A properly executed traitor would send the right message. "Tie him up," Frey finally ordered. "Secure the prisoners. We're taking them all back to Fort Huachuca." As the soldiers moved to obey, Dahana coughed blood, reached out weakly. Naiche took her hand, spoke soft words in Apache. Ezra couldn't understand them, but he understood the tone. "Goodbye. It's okay. You fought well." Dahana's eyes found Ezra's. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Then she was gone, eyes staring at nothing, hand going slack in her grandmother's grasp. Naiche's keening rose again, joined by the surviving women, a sound of grief so profound it seemed to crack the sky itself. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Even Frey looked away, made uncomfortable by the raw humanity of it. Ezra felt tears on his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. 7 years without crying, 7 years of dry silence. Now the dam had broken, and he wept openly, not caring who saw. "Shut them up," Frey ordered. "Let them mourn," Ezra said. "Give them that much." "I don't take orders from you anymore, Captain. It's not an order, it's a request. 5 minutes, then we'll go quietly." Frey studied him, then shrugged. 5 minutes. Then if they're not quiet, we make them quiet. Those 5 minutes stretched eternal and impossibly brief. The women sang their death songs, honored their fallen, said goodbyes in a language the government had tried to erase. Ezra listened, memorizing every note, every word he didn't understand but felt anyway. When it was done, they allowed themselves to be tied without resistance. Naiche looked at Ezra one last time, said in careful English, "You chose different. I see it. I remember it. That is enough. I'm sorry," he managed, "for all of it, for that day, for this day, for everything. Sorry is word, choice is action. You acted. That matters." They were loaded onto horses, hands bound, roped together like animals. Ezra was last, still bleeding from the blows to his head and face. The ride back would take days, and he knew what those days would bring for the women, knew what Frey and his men considered their due. He'd failed. Again, just in a different way. "Move out!" Frey called. As they rode from the ranch, Ezra looked back once. His house, if it could be called that, sat small and forsaken under the huge sky. The graves of the women who died were visible on the ridge, fresh rock piles that would eventually scatter and disappear, leaving no trace they'd ever existed. But he would remember, even if no one else did, even if his testimony was dismissed, even if he hanged for treason, he would remember that for one night 12 women had found shelter, and for a few desperate minutes they'd fought together against impossible odds. It wasn't redemption. Naiche was right about that. One choice didn't erase the other, but it was something. A single act of resistance against 7 years of silence, against a lifetime of looking away. It would have to be enough. Fort Huachuca squatted on the Arizona landscape like a warning, all harsh angles and dust-blown parade grounds, surrounded by walls that kept the desert out and the order in. Ezra had been here before, years ago, when it was just another outpost in a war that everyone claimed was necessary. Now it felt like a monument to inevitability. They threw him in the stockade immediately. The cell was 8 feet square, adobe walls, one small window too high to see anything but sky, a bucket in the corner, a cot with a thin mattress that smelled of mildew and previous prisoners. He'd been in worse places during the war, but never as a captive. The women were kept somewhere else. He didn't know where. He asked the guards, but they looked through him like he didn't exist. A traitor deserved no courtesies, no information. He was lucky they fed him at all. Days passed in a blur of heat and waiting. No visitors, no legal counsel, no word of when the court-martial would begin. Just the endless Arizona sun baking the adobe, making the cell into an oven, and the cold nights where he shivered under a single blanket. On the 4th day, the door opened and a man in civilian clothes entered. Older, probably 60, with the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime around the military without being part of it. He carried a leather satchel and an expression of professional neutrality. "Captain Callahan, I'm Theodore Warren, assigned as your legal counsel." Ezra almost laughed. "By who? The Army?" "By law. Every man facing court-martial is entitled to representation, even traitors." Warren sat on the edge of the cot without asking permission. "I'll be honest. This is not a case I can win. The evidence is overwhelming. 6 soldiers dead by your hand, or by the hands of those you were harboring. Multiple witnesses. You're facing execution." "I know. Then you understand my role here is damage control, not miracle working. The best I can do is argue for leniency in sentencing. Life imprisonment instead of hanging, perhaps." "I don't want leniency." Warren sighed. "Captain, I understand you may feel guilty about whatever happened out there, but throwing your life away won't change." "It's not about guilt," Ezra interrupted. "Or maybe it is, but not the way you think." He leaned forward. "I want the trial. I want to testify. I want it all on record. What Frey was planning to do to those women, what happened in Spring Canyon in '79, all of it. That's inadvisable. Bringing up past military actions will only make you look worse. The prosecution will argue you've always been unstable, always harbored sympathies for the enemy." "Good. Let them, as long as I get to speak." Warren studied him for a long moment. "You're not trying to save yourself at all, are you? This is a suicide by court-martial." "No, it's the opposite. It's finally speaking after 7 years of silence. It's testifying, bearing witness." Ezra met the lawyer's eyes. "You said you can't win this case. You're right. But you can make sure my testimony gets entered into the record. Can you do that?" "If you insist on testifying against legal advice, yes. It will be part of the official transcript." "Then that's what I want." The trial began on a Monday morning in the fort's chapel-turned-courtroom. 3 officers sat in judgment, a colonel, a major, and a captain, all with the stone faces of men who'd already decided the verdict before hearing a word. The prosecutor was a young lieutenant with too much ambition and a stack of papers documenting Ezra's crimes. The prosecution's case took less than 2 hours. They called Frey first. "Lieutenant, please describe what you found when you arrived at the defendant's ranch." Frey, freshly pressed and composed, painted a picture of heroic soldiers attempting a lawful operation, ambushed by a renegade officer and his Apache accomplices. He described his men being butchered, women fighting like savages, Ezra directing the defense with military precision. It was clear, Frey concluded, that Captain Callahan had not only harbored fugitives, but had actively conspired with them to resist lawful authority. His actions directly resulted in the deaths of 6 good men. No further questions. Warren declined to cross-examine. What was the point? Everything Frey said was essentially true, just stripped of context. They called other soldiers next. Each told the same story with minor variations. The defendant had hidden the women, had fought alongside them, had killed or helped kill their brothers in arms. The fact that Ezra had tried to save the women's lives was presented as proof of his betrayal, not his humanity. Finally, the prosecution rested. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were credible. The defendant was clearly guilty of every charge. "Does the defense wish to present any witnesses?" the colonel asked. Warren stood. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Ezra Callahan." A murmur ran through the courtroom, small, but there. Officers didn't usually testify on their own behalf. It was considered undignified, desperate. Ezra took the stand and was sworn in. His hand didn't shake as he placed it on the Bible, though he wondered what kind of God would recognize an oath from someone like him. Warren began gently. "Captain Callahan, can you describe your military service prior to the events in question?" 15 years, 3rd Cavalry, served in Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. Multiple engagements against Comanche, Kiowa, Apache. Decorated twice for valor. Promoted to captain in 1878. "And when did you resign your commission?" "August 1879. "Why?" This was it, the moment of testimony. Ezra took a breath. "Because in March of that year, I participated in an action at Spring Canyon that I could no longer justify." "Can you describe that action?" "Objection," the prosecutor rose. "The defendant's past service is not relevant to the current charges." "Your Honor," Warren countered, "the defendant's state of mind is absolutely relevant. His past experiences directly inform his actions at the ranch." The colonel considered, then nodded. "I'll allow it, but keep it brief." Ezra continued. "We received intelligence that an Apache village was harboring warriors who'd raided supply convoys. We were ordered to neutralize the threat. When we arrived at dawn, the warriors fought. 8 of them. They died quickly. But then..." He paused, remembering. Always remembering. "Then my men kept shooting. Women, children, elders. I stood on a ridge and watched it happen. I didn't order it, but I didn't stop it either." "How many non-combatants died?" 37. Another murmur, louder this time. The colonel banged his gavel. "Order." "And this weighs on you?" Warren asked. "Every day, every hour. It's why I left, why I isolated myself. Because I knew I'd forfeited the right to serve, to lead, to call myself a soldier. Yet when the Apache women came to your door, you helped them. Why?" "Because..." Ezra stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Because it was the only choice I could live with. I couldn't change what I did in that canyon, but I could choose differently in that moment. And one of those women, Naiche, she was there in the canyon. She survived that day, lost her sons. And she came to my door anyway, asking for help." "What did you think would happen when Lieutenant Frey arrived?" "I knew he'd kill them. Or worse. I'd heard stories about Frey, his methods. I couldn't let that happen again. Couldn't stand by again." "Even though you knew it would cost you your life?" "Yes." Warren nodded. Let that sit. No further questions. The prosecutor approached with the confidence of someone who knew they'd already won. "Captain Callahan, you claim you were motivated by conscience. But isn't it true that you were simply aiding the enemy? They weren't soldiers, they were refugees. They were Apache. We're at war with the Apache. We're at war with Free Apache. These women were prisoners being transported to a reservation. Prisoners who escaped. Fugitives." The prosecutor's voice hardened. "And you helped them resist lawful recapture, resulting in the deaths of 6 soldiers. How is that anything but treason?" "It's a choice between 2 wrongs. Handing over women to men I knew would rape and kill them, or defending them. I chose to defend them. Based on unsubstantiated rumors about Lieutenant Frey. Based on his reputation. based on what I knew he was capable of. Your Honor, I object to this slander of a decorated officer. But Ezra kept talking, his voice rising. Based on an incident in 1878 where Frey tortured 3 Apache prisoners to death, and I reported him for it. Based on the fact that nothing happened to him, that he was transferred and probably promoted, based on a system that rewards brutality and punishes mercy. The courtroom erupted. The colonel's gavel slammed repeatedly. "Captain Callahan, you will restrain yourself, or I will hold you in contempt." "I'm already in contempt," Ezra shot back. "Contempt of this whole rotten system that calls murder, pacification, and rape inevitable casualties of war." "Captain!" "You want my testimony? Here it is. We're committing genocide. We're systematically destroying a people, erasing their culture, murdering their children, and calling it civilization. And I was part of it. I'm guilty of that. But I'm also guilty of standing by for years while it happened. Of being silent while atrocities were committed in my name, in all our names." Warren was trying to get him to sit down, but Ezra shook him off. This was what he'd come here for. This was why he'd opened that door. Those 6 soldiers died because they were following a monster, because Frey told them they could have sport with women who'd already lost everything. Because our government has decided that Apache lives don't matter, that they're animals to be penned or killed as we see fit. And I'm tired of being silent about it. "Enough!" The colonel's voice cut through the room. "Captain Callahan, you are in contempt of this court. Bailiff, remove him." As guards grabbed his arms, Ezra kept talking. "There were 12 women. 12! And now only 5 are alive. Where are they? What's happened to them?" "Has anyone even asked?" They dragged him toward the door, but he twisted to look at the 3 judges, at the prosecutor, at Frey sitting in the front row with barely contained rage on his face. "I opened my door because it was the only decent thing left I could do. And I'd do it again, every time, because some choices are worth dying for." The door slammed behind him, cutting off whatever response might have come. They threw him back in his cell, locked the door, left him in darkness. He sat on the cot, breathing hard, his heart hammering. He'd done it. He'd testified. It was on record now, part of the official transcript. They couldn't erase it, couldn't pretend it didn't happen. It wouldn't change anything. He knew that. The verdict was already decided. The sentence would be death. But somewhere, someday, someone might read that transcript, might see that at least one man had tried to speak the truth. It was a small thing, probably meaningless in the grand scheme of history, but it was all he had. The verdict came the next day, guilty on all charges. The sentence came 5 minutes later, death by hanging, to be carried out at dawn in 3 days' time. Ezra received the news without emotion. He'd known it was coming, had counted on it even. 3 days, 72 hours, then nothing. Warren visited that evening, looking exhausted. "I filed an appeal with the territorial governor. It's a formality. He won't grant it. But I had to try. I appreciate the effort. Captain, what you said in there, about Spring Canyon, about genocide, you understand you made it impossible for anyone to show you mercy. I wasn't looking for mercy. Then what were you looking for?" Ezra considered the question. A chance to break 7 years of silence, to say what needed to be said, even if no one wants to hear it. That's all. Warren shook his head. "You're either the most principled man I've ever met or the most suicidal. I can't decide which. Maybe both." The lawyer left, taking his impossible task with him. Ezra lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, counting the hours he had left. On the second day, they brought him a visitor. The door opened and Nietzsche stepped in, flanked by 2 guards. She looked diminished somehow, worn down by whatever the past week had brought. But her eyes were still fierce, still alive. She said something to the guards in Apache, probably an insult by their expressions, then sat on the floor across from Ezra's cot. "They let you see me?" he asked. "I ask many times. Finally they say yes. Maybe they think I come to spit on you. Curse you. She smiled slightly. I do not. How are the others? Her smile faded. 3 more died, 1 from wounds, 2 from what happened after. She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Only 2 left now, besides me. Ezra felt the weight of those deaths like stones on his chest. I'm sorry. I tried to. Stop. She held up a hand. You do not apologize. You did what you could. More than you needed to do. More than anyone else would do. It wasn't enough. It never is enough. My whole life, nothing is enough. But still we try. That is what makes us human. She was quiet for a moment. They tell me you will hang. Yes. Day after tomorrow. Good. He blinked, surprised. I say good because you get clean death. Quick. Not like my sons. Not like Dahana. You are lucky. But her tone suggested she didn't believe in luck anymore, good or bad. Nietzsche, in the trial, I testified about Spring Canyon. About what happened that day. I named it for what it was. I know. They tell me. Guards laugh about it. Say you are crazy, man. Say you betray your own people. She leaned forward. But I know different. You bear witness. That is sacred thing. To see and to speak what you see, even when it costs you everything. It won't change anything. Maybe, maybe not. But it is on record now, yes? Written down? So it happened. Not just in my memory, not just in dreams of dead children. In their words, in their language. It is written that this thing happened. That is something. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, Ezra could hear the sounds of the fort, boots on wood, shouted orders, the everyday business of empire. My granddaughter, Nietzsche said finally, Dahana, in the house before she died, she said to me, he chose different. That is what she said, and I see it too. You could have closed door, could have saved yourself, but you chose different. She deserved better than to die bleeding on my floor. We all deserve better than what we get. But deserving is not the question. The question is, what do you do with what is given? She stood, joints creaking. You are given a ranch, a gun, 7 years of silence. You are given 12 women at your door. You are given choice, and you choose to open door, to fight, to speak. That is all anyone can do. It's not redemption. No, she agreed. Not redemption. But maybe a balancing. On one side, canyon and silence. On other side, open door and testimony. Not equal. Never equal. But both real. Both true. The guards indicated that time was up. Nietzsche moved toward the door, then paused. I will be there. When they hang you, I will watch. Not from hate. From... She searched for the word. Respect. Yes? For man who finally chose different. Thank you. She nodded once, then was gone. Dawn came cold and clear. They woke him early, gave him a final meal he couldn't eat, offered a priest he declined. His hands shook as they bound them, not from fear exactly, but from the accumulated weight of everything. 7 years of waiting, 1 night of choice, a week of consequence. The gallows had been erected in the parade ground, visible from every corner of the fort. A crowd had gathered, soldiers, officers, a few townspeople who'd ridden out to witness military justice. Ezra scanned the faces and found Nietzsche standing near the back, flanked by the 2 surviving women. They watched with expressions that held no triumph, no satisfaction. Just witnessing, as she'd promised. Frey was there too, front row, arms crossed. He caught Ezra's eye and smiled. This was his victory, his vindication, the traitor hanging while the loyal soldier watched. They walked Ezra up the steps. The wood creaked under his boots. The noose waited, rough hemp that would burn as it tightened. The hangman was a specialist, brought in from Tucson. He adjusted the rope with professional care, checking knots, testing tension. The fort commander read the charges and the sentence in a voice that echoed across the silent parade ground. Treason, murder, betrayal of uniform and duty, guilty on all counts, sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. Does the condemned have any final words? Ezra looked out at the assembled crowd, at the soldiers who'd fought under men like him, at the officers who gave orders and expected obedience, at Nietzsche and the survivors watching from the back. I do. He drew a breath, felt the morning air fill his lungs one more time. What I did with full knowledge of the consequences. I regret nothing except that I didn't act sooner, didn't speak sooner. For 7 years I was silent about things that should have been shouted from every rooftop. I'm done being silent. His voice grew stronger. We are engaged in a campaign of extermination against the Apache people. We call it pacification, but it's murder. We call it civilization, but it's genocide. And every man wearing this uniform is complicit, whether they pull the trigger or just follow orders. Murmurs from the crowd, but he pushed on. I stood by once while innocents died. I won't apologize for refusing to stand by again. If that makes me a traitor, then I'm proud to be one. Because some betrayals are more honorable than the loyalty they betray. He looked at Nietzsche one last time. To the survivors, I'm sorry for what was done to you. I'm sorry for my part in it. I cannot undo the past, but I hope that opening my door meant something. That fighting beside you meant something. Even if we lost. The commander nodded to the hangman. Proceed. The hood went over his head, blocking out the sun, the crowd, everything except the sound of his own breathing. He heard the lever being drawn back, felt the trapdoor shift beneath his feet. In the darkness, he thought of that night, 12 women at his door, asking for help. Thought of Dahana's last words, thank you. Thought of Nietzsche saying, you chose different. He had. Finally. After 7 years of silence, he'd made a choice that mattered. The trapdoor opened. The epilogue. The transcript of United States versus Captain Ezra Callahan was filed in the Territorial Archives, where it gathered dust for 37 years. In 1923, a historian researching the Apache Wars discovered it while looking for something else entirely. She was struck by the testimony, by the raw honesty of a man condemning himself and the system he'd served. She published excerpts in an academic journal. Few read it. Those who did mostly dismissed it as the ravings of a traitor, a man who'd broken under the strain of war. But in 1968, during another war and another time of questioning, a student found the full transcript in a forgotten archive. The testimony was republished, this time finding an audience ready to hear it. Ezra's words, "Some betrayals are more honorable than the loyalty they betray," were quoted in protests, in articles, in debates about conscience and duty. The ranch in the valley was long gone by then, reclaimed by the desert. But a historical marker was eventually placed near where it once stood. It read, on this site in 1886, former Captain Ezra Callahan provided refuge to 12 Apache women fleeing military persecution. In defending them, he and 11 of the women lost their lives. Callahan's court-martial testimony exposed atrocities committed during the Apache Wars and stands as an early voice of conscience against the genocide of indigenous peoples. Nietzsche lived until 1924, dying at 93 on the reservation, where she'd been forced to live out her years. Before her death, she told her story to a young Apache teacher who was collecting oral histories. She spoke of the canyon where her sons died, of the 7-year silence, of the night 12 desperate women knocked on a door and found it opened. He was not a good man, she said in the recording, her English still accented but clear. He did terrible things. He stood by while my children died. But in the end, when it mattered, he chose different. That is all any of us can do. See the wrong and choose different. The recording is preserved in the Smithsonian now, digitized and available to anyone who wants to listen. Nietzsche's voice, speaking across a century, telling the story of one night, one choice, one man who broke 7 years of silence to bear witness. It didn't save the women, didn't prevent the genocide, didn't change the outcome of the wars or the suffering that followed, but it mattered anyway, because testimony matters, speaking matters, choosing different matters, even when, especially when, it costs everything.